Fun isn't something one considers when balancing the universe. Here's your look at the Hot Toys Avengers Infinity War. This is the 1/6 scale collectible figure of Thanos. The product code for this Mad Titan is MMS479, and if you're interested in picking up Thanos for yourself, you can head on over to Alter Ego Comics and order yours today. To get this review underway, we're going to, of course, do what we always do on this channel first before we kind of get into the collectible, and that is measuring off. The Towering Titan is going to be a little taller, that's a whole lot of T's, than your standard 6-scale figure. And just how much? Let's take the Ultra Measure 5000, my trusty tape measure, and put it to the very top of Thanos' head. According to the readouts, you're looking at a rather impressive, substantially impressive 16.5 inches in height. Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus, and Thanos is substantially taller than standard 6-scale figures. Switching that also over to centimeters to appease those asking for centimeters, a task I'm more than happy to take up. You're looking at Thanos standing 42 centimeters tall. Gosh, that's pretty tall. For some size comparisons, because I'm all about size comparisons, we'll bring in an Iron Man. Now, sadly, at the time that I'm shooting the review for Thanos, I don't have the Iron Man Mark 50, the notable suit seen in Avengers Infinity War. I, however, do have one of the last Iron Man suits prior to that, and that is the Iron Man Mark 46, which so happens to be the Iron Man suit that he wore in Captain America Civil War. So that's a good enough comparison. The height of the 46 to 50 is only marginal, so this will give you an idea of exactly how much taller. My God, he's that much taller. I mean, how much taller would that be? That's, well, I mean, again, about a 5 inches or so difference between the Iron Man Mark 46 and the quite towering Titan of Thanos. Despite for his towering size, I'm probably going to use towering a lot in this review, Thanos still manages to get himself a display stand. Baseball diamond-shaped stand, as we've seen with some of the larger scale figures. This one does have the Avengers Infinity War art, kind of an art print there on the top, featuring the Infinity Gauntlet and the various Infinity Stones. And then on the front of that, we've got Avengers Infinity War Thanos on a not quite front placard. It's actually been printed on. Sometimes, most of the times actually, they use a metal placard, a little strip of metal that'll actually have the character's name featured on the front. Kind of on the fence. I mean, really, they could have also kept the trend consistent with one another and used a front silver placard, but I'm still okay with the fact that at least we have the character's name featured on the front. The print itself is nice. I mean, I have no qualms, no issues necessarily with the print. You've got a clear post, and you've got a supporting cradle in which the figure's going to stand on. Talk about that in a second. Remind me if you can. I'm going to go ahead and take this off, because there's also a variation that comes included with Thanos as well. It's this. It's the surface terrain of the planet Titan, in which, of course, he battles the Avengers, leading quickly and very closely to the idea of removing the Infinity Gauntlet in its entirety. But unfortunately, Star-Lord had other plans for that and kind of ruined the whole... Yeah, I think we can forgive him by now. The print itself is decent enough. And by this point, I'm not really sure what I would ask further of Hot Toys. I mean, again, you get the variations. So, I mean, if you got one or the other, kind of like this one myself. I mean, the all-terrain look to it is neat as well. Unfortunately, though, it does still run the problems as well that if you're looking at it, it looks like a picture. It doesn't have any raised elevations. I really don't know, again, what would be an expectation level on my part. I guess maybe if they had found a way, this is something that they could consider doing for future releases. I'm just going to take this off for the time being because it's probably better indicated for you. You know, every once in a while you'll get something that's textured, or should I say, when you flip it around, the shapes have been kind of pushed through, and it's probably hard to describe that, but we're basically like a vacuum form is probably the best way to describe it. A vacuum form plate like this, where if they had actually taken the stones and made similar shapes underneath that and vacuum formed it, so that you're not necessarily having to add additional stones, but at the very least it would have at least the raised shape of the stones, and you could still kind of keep it to just plastic. You wouldn't have to add all extra stuff to it. This is possible, as something that they could consider doing. I mean, far be it. I mean, I'm probably not the only person that has thought of this, but vacuum-formed surfaces like this certainly could add a level of three-dimensional look to these bases. Because, I mean, right off the bat right now, it just looks like an image. It just looks like a picture. We can go ahead and add this to the display base, just like so. Line everything up, just like so. Take the clear post, just like so, and feed that through. The post, of course, as you could guess it, keeps everything in place, and this won't shift around on you. The thing about it, though, and I'm going to just take the base, I'm going to move Thanos out of the way just for a second, and I'm going to put the base down. The reason why I'm doing all of this, I'm kind of walking you through all of this, is one of the things I kind of wish these figures could kind of get away from doing, is moving the post so far to the edge. I get the surface space is sort of the presentation of the figure, but why they can't actually move the whole, I'm nitpicking, I know, so quickly into this review. They're small things, guys. They're small things. If they had moved the hole further in, Thanos' footprint would still be basically right around here. The problem when you put the figure so far back, first of all, I mean, you're sacrificing a whole lot of shelf space for ideally something that the figure really is only taking up this much space. I get it sort of supports the figure being that he's so large and heavy, but I really think they have to get around to moving these holes in. Moving in enough, even like right there, you get enough of the area around the figure, and it doesn't often feel like, when you will see it here with Thanos, the figure, it doesn't look like he's so far back. I think also the Neo from the Matrix, also from the folks over at Hot Toys, suffered the same problem. The base itself had the hole, I think from what I remember, too far back, ultimately meaning that Neo was going to be like right here. They really should start moving these holes further in. The other thing also that they should probably look to do as well is the cradle is fine for a 6-scale figure. When you take the size, though, of Thanos and you put him on the display base, the cradle supports it fine enough. But the problem is, because the cradle is so short, it doesn't give you a lot of play. So if you want to have Thanos, for example, in a walking pose, the moment you start moving the legs any bit forward, you're kind of taking away from how much support that cradle actually affords you. I think they should have maybe lengthened it slightly, of course, causing a rather embarrassing additional profile sticking out from the figure, but still, you'd have some additional support for the figure. Ideally, my takeaway from all this is still for the statue's display base, way down there. Again, if they could just move the hole further forward, just kind of bring the figure a little bit forward. You don't have to be so tucked back there, Thanos. Come on, you need to spotlight yourself and come a little bit further forward on the display base. Speaking of also display bases, or not so much display bases, Thanos also includes this as a backdrop. Now, you can probably already see one problem that's going to be facing us as collectors when you're going to be displaying a figure like Thanos. Thanos already is clocked a lot taller than standard 6-scale figures. Then adding additionally to that, you've got the backdrop here of Titan, which is fine and good, but it does awfully cause a lot of unnecessary additional space, well, additional space that you can't probably necessarily afford. So I do think it's nice, don't get me wrong, and I'm all about having backdrops behind the figures, but unfortunately it just does mean that the figure is, when it's all said and done, when you add all this extra stuff to it, it's just way too much space. That would take up an entire shelf easily of one detolf and carry its way also into the second part of the detolf. It would pretty much carry a 2-shelf requirement in order to fit all of this in frame, or all of this in display. The thing also about this particular diorama backdrop is that I do find it's awfully blurry. I get the fact that Thanos, of course, is in the foreground, and actually, you know what, for the sake of this review, it would make no sense whatsoever to be talking about this and not simply have the figure posed in front of the diorama. There we go. As I was saying, the character, the figure of Thanos is in the foreground, so you can understand that the background would be slightly blurred. That's fine in film, where stuff is always frantically moving at a fast pace. You can't really, in the case especially of the battle on Titan, everything is moving so fast, it's hard to really pinpoint and lock your eyes in one scene, which is fine. When you get to something that is staction, Thanos isn't going to be getting up and running around anytime soon, at least I certainly hope he isn't. As a result of it, though, you're looking at a staction figure, and as a result of it, you're also wanting to then look at a staction image behind it. You can't have the background as if there's an action pose or an action motion happening at the moment, and then have the figure in front of it completely staction. The end result, though, is while the figure does look good in front of it, the background is awfully blurry, and it should have been something high definition and high resolution images are not new at all. I mean, they could have easily used a high definition, super clear image of Titan that you could have actually displayed behind Thanos. One small thing you can do as a workaround to that is there is one crease that they've put as a separate panel along the bottom. You could actually, in theory, fold that up if you want to take up a lot less space. This results in a display backdrop that's about the same height as Thanos. The unfortunate end of it, though, is that being that these are all joined together, you can't bend it forward. What you can do, though, is you can bend these down, and you can bend these around this way to bring these forward. In fact, actually, if you bring it up like this and pop these down, this is actually what I was talking about here, you can bend these down this way and you can have a smaller diorama. Unfortunately, though, it means that it's going to be kind of freestanding and there's not going to be a whole lot of support behind it. It ultimately also means, too, that the base is only this high. This has a greater clearing to it, and hopefully I can show you guys here. Even though you can fold it up to reduce the height of the display backdrop, it does then add for an extra space down below, which the display base isn't going to clear. So these are going to kind of sit along the top of the display base. If that's not something that bothers you at all, I mean, then you can go the route of shortening this, not making this as tall as it was before. As it stands right now, bending it this way causes the display base backdrop to be about the same height as Thanos here. I think we can all agree I've spent enough time talking about the display stands and talking about the backdrop, so let's spend what necessary time should be spent on looking at the 6-scale release of Thanos. What an impressive specimen this is. ultimately picking up through the various online sites. A lot of the sites actually were delayed getting this. Like I said, I picked this up from the folks over at alteregocomics.com. And unfortunately, like even on their part, everything was kind of slightly delayed. Sideshow Collectibles, and through the distribution of the Hot Toy release of Thanos, there was kind of a considerable gap between the first run of Thanos figures and subsequently what a lot of collectors were able to then get later. As a result, some people got Thanos earlier, some people got Thanos right around this time frame. He was where he was really more mass circulated. So if you could kind of overlook the fact that there's a slight delay in Thanos coming out, as we have already gotten news, of course, that we're getting ourselves in an endgame version of Thanos that's going to have the gold armor. I still think, even though this guy's a little late to the game, he is certainly a worthy candidate for one of the better figures that Hot Toys have released in recent memory. He's really quite the impressive sight to see. He does have a few little hiccups, which we will talk about in a second. But I guess the best place we can start of all places should be really the head, and we'll start the review there. Thanos was already a worthy contender for one of the best CG villains in movies. His CG, the CG to create this character in the film, just blew me away. How accurate and how realistic, even like the skin, little pores, things like stubble, which Thanos actually sported in the film, and the way natural light reflected off of his skin actually at times made him look like he was a real thing on the camera. The thing about Hot Toys, though, is that they have equally done just as much the service to the figure's head sculpt as it was in the film. An uncanny likeness of Lord Mad Titan Thanos, just a spectacular looking piece. You can even see really, really closely, and as close as the camera will afford me, you can see like even the little small pore marks, even like the stubbling in the lower half, or the lower bottom section around his chin. You can see that there's the indicator there of texturing and possible stubble. There's not really much in the way of coloring on this guy. I mean, of course, I have to correct myself by saying that no notable flesh tones, or flesh tones that we're normally used to seeing, is present here on Thanos. Instead, they've swapped that out, obviously, for the Titan's purple skin color scheme, and I think it works exceptionally well here. It's hard to actually pinpoint how many different purples are on here. I might see 2, I might see 3. It almost seems as if every single time I'm turning the figure's head and lighting is hitting it in a different way, I'm seeing colors where I didn't see colors before. Areas right above his earlobe, for example, seem a lighter shade of purple. Obviously, his lips are a different shade of purple. But all the scarring and texturings that you would see in the film, like I said, captured perfectly here in the head sculpt. Yes, I mean, really looking at his head portrait, it's a marvel, no pun intended, how much he's changed just in the films alone. The films, through his various different appearances, through the various different films, Thanos has had some real drastic changes made to him, making him, I think, much more realistic looking versus some of his earlier appearances. Even like his earliest appearance in the original Avengers film as a serving Easter egg as the start of what things could come. Thanos looked a little bit more cartoonier, a little more darker and purple. I like they actually have gone to a lighter purple. And this is not necessarily anything specifically about the Hot Toys release, but just even in the cinematic films that I like that they kind of went with more of a grayish purple skin to them, and not the bright purple that we had saw before. Again, it's just as a service to Hot Toys, the fact that they were able to capture that as good as they did and translate that to such a stellar head sculpt as Thanos's here. Now, I've taken the liberty of taking off Thanos's head just so I can show you that there are 2 variations of head portrait that come included with this 6-scale figure release. It's even hard to even use the term and utter the words 6 scale for how tall this figure is, but we'll go ahead and stick with that for the rest of this review. You can see that there are 2 distinct head portraits. We're talking a little bit about how he has very much, not as much expression necessarily in this face, more than makes up for it then in this head portrait here, where you can see a much angrier head portrait in the eyebrow area, and certainly around the mouth area as well. Now, some people also can look at this as perhaps the scene in which the Avengers are trying to remove the gauntlet from Thanos' arm. I kind of also look at this and pair that with the bent arm, which we will look at in a second for his list of accessories. But I kind of picture this as the promotional artwork that they were kind of showing and circulating around for Infinity War, where Thanos has basically got his teeth grimacing and he's got the fisted Infinity Gauntlet raised up to the sky. It's kind of the captured likeness that I'm seeing here myself when we're having a look at this head. Now the head is pretty straightforward and pretty easy to change out. I'm going to pop this off, which I've already done. I'm going to take the head, which we are going to do now, and you're just going to go back to the dumbbell ball joint that's located at the top. I call it a dumbbell ball joint because it's going to have a ball joint here, and then you can't see it, but there's a secondary ball joint rooted into the socket section of the neck. We're going to go ahead and quite easily, actually, just pop on his head sculpt. It's not going to go anywhere. You can get a full rotation out of his head. We'll talk about his articulation in a second. But again, a nice little alternative for displaying Thanos is this head portrait. Honestly speaking, just between you and me and, of course, anybody else in this room. Hi everybody. According to everybody and according to me, as my opinion specifically for this figure, I kind of like going with the defaulted head sculpt. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like this head portrait, but I kind of like the fact that he's got more just a closed mouth. It's kind of just where I picture Thanos. And if I was being able to pull it off, which can be a feat all on its own, of him doing the snap, which is not really something you can do with the glove, sadly, I probably would display Thanos with this head portrait and have his arm raised up as if he's mid-snapping. We'll talk about that in a second. I keep saying in a second for a lot of the things, but there's really a lot to cover off on Thanos. His accessories are going to be quite limited, so we'll probably spend a little bit less time doing that. But for the amount of time that we focused on looking at the head, we obviously got to look at the rest of Thanos' body. How does that stack up? The answer is rather well, actually. Now, Thanos has two distinct looks in the film, kind of the opener and the entryway into his appearance into the movie. He's wearing and sporting the gold armor, something of which he then removes after the fact to kind of reveal this under armor underneath. I don't know if I'm the only one that thinks this, but looking at Thanos' outfit as it stands right now, I find has somewhat of an Egyptian look to it. Again, I might be the only one that sees that. I think it's primarily because he's got the gold collar to him. As the Egyptian outfits, especially the head pharaohs and queens, often would have like a collar and a band of gold at the top, and then the rest of their fabric outfit would drape down from that. Kind of very much get that vibe when I'm looking at Thanos here. The gold actually is rather done nicely. Simply not just relying on one coloring of gold. You can see that they've added these little flecks and specks of paint around the outer edges here, just before it connects off to his colored shoulder plate, which, as you can see, if I just spin the figure around, much larger representation of those plates shown here on the back, which again has all that additional flex. Flex probably would be the best word to use, I think, for describing this. It's almost as if somebody took like a paintbrush and just kind of flecked the paint onto it. But it adds a little bit extra to it, so it just doesn't feel like on the surface it's just a gold paint. So there's a little extra bit of details like this that go a long way for me. Speaking of things that go a long way for me, I also want to talk about his blue top parts, the tunic parts, or the top armor part of his entire suit, because like really from the leg, the waist down, I don't feel he gets as much detail happening here. I want to talk a little bit though about the blue here. First and foremost, I want to talk about the texturing. You can see really up close, and hopefully the camera is affording this, you can see really up close all the texturing to the blue outfit. Now the blue outfit has two types of texturing. You got the smoothness of the bands of black, almost kind of a darker, almost like a very, very dark bluish gray, borderlining even on a black side. That is a shinier material versus the texturing of the blue fabric that they used right here. There is a little bit of give. I mean, you could put your finger to it and feel like, it almost feels like it's got a rubbery type of material that they would have used for it. You can kind of feel how his body is underneath all of that. But the talking point I wanted to mention here is, speaking of detailing, speaking a little bit as we had talked about with the collar, I want to talk a little bit here about the additional painting that they added to the blue. I mean, any company could have easily just slapped an outfit onto a figure. It's really where you separate the companies from themselves, is the amount of extra kind of care that they go back in and do. Case in point, like the blue. The blue, actually, if you look at it, and the way that the light hits it when you turn the figure, you can see that there's not just one color happening here. There's rather two, possibly even three. Around the outer edges here, and most definitely down the sections of his abdomens, gets afforded, looks like an airbrushing of almost a purple or very dark blue that's been added in there as well. It's just those additional low lights of color that just add some depth to an existing body. Because I mean, really, again, you could have just given this guy his blue outfit, at least the top part of his outfit in blue, and some people would be completely content with that. Appreciate, though, the fact that they would go in and they would just add some additional low lights to it. Those a little bit of sprays, airbrushings of the darker colors really go a long way for me. Carrying on, what I still continue to believe that is kind of very much an Egyptian pharaoh vibe. He's got the gold, just gold metallic belt. It's not metallic, it's plastic, kind of metal belt that he's got around there that mimics the same color scheme as his shoulders and his front necklace guard here, if you will. He's got these side skirts, which are rather interesting, actually. Even in the film, I found them kind of intriguing. Kind of gives him a sense that he's almost wearing like kind of like one of those old style tunics. These little strips of fabric and the longer skirt represented on the back, which I might also add is more of a plastic material than anything else. Very, very durable. I don't feel like these are going to tear like fabric could accidentally. As it goes, though, as we get kind of further down from the waist down, things get a little less exciting. Of course, he still has interesting looking fabric that Hot Toys would have pulled from their various different spools of fabric, ultimately settling on something that almost looks a little bit like corduroy. It's a stretchy material, hopefully I can show you here, that does have some stretch and give to it, which is really good for, especially when you are wanting to bend and move the figure. You don't want fabric hindering that, like some of the Captain Americas, for example, from Hot Toys have had that problem in the past. Decent enough looking fabric, but you really couldn't do too much with the figure underneath all of that because the fabric was so tight and conformed and formed to the body of the figure. Then we get down to his boots. Not really a whole much to say about his boots. Some nice additional paint. I do feel, though, and maybe it's just the material that they end up going with, the plastic kind of comes across giving it a colder vibe, both in surface and appearance. It does look like it could have probably afforded just a little bit of extra paint. I'm really not sure, as I'm not a paint expert, what else I would have done to it, but maybe some additional highlights could have probably helped, or just some scuffs and maybe some just wear to the boots probably could have helped just make them look a little less like I just put them on. There's the undersoles of Thanos, really substantially large soles. I don't think there's anybody, probably even the Hulk probably wouldn't have had boots this large. I wonder if they would share the same shoe size. But let's proceed with the rest of this review. Now I know why Thanos has a look of anguish on his face. You're ripping off his arms. Well, don't worry, the arm actually is removable. It's one of two different options available for displaying the figure. I found it actually was easier to take the arm off than simply just bringing and picking up a large figure like this and bringing it as close to the camera as I possibly could. Instead, I decided the latter and just take the arm completely off. I just found it was a lot easier that way. Now, there's two different variations of this type of arm. The other arm gets nothing. So if you wanted this arm to have something, unfortunately, I would have to disappoint you with that. But at least this arm, the arm that has the gauntlet, has two different looks. One is the straight arm, which I guess we'll look at first and foremost, that does have still the articulation to it, but unfortunately, this is one thing I want to talk about. For these higher grade premium figures. Thanos certainly was not a cheap figure at all, and unfortunately we're kind of going down the road of something that seems to be an ongoing problem. D. Knight, for example, one of my go-to reviewers for 6-scale figures, talked extensively about this. the idea that when you get these figures, for example, there is a kind of a time frame, a longevity to how long they last. Depending on what type of materials they use, certainly will dictate how long these figures will last in your collection. The reason I bring that into point for talking about Thanos is because while his head is fine, and while his body is fine, his arms are going down the same route of something I wish would be changed for future figures. And some figures that I hold dear to this day, like the Wonder Woman, for example, from the original Batman v Superman line, or Justice League, also have this problem. Not specifically this problem, but the idea that you can't really move and manipulate them. Thanos, as good as it looks to have these seamless, and showing you what it looks like, there is no indication whatsoever of a joint. You know there's a joint inside by the fact that you can bend it. You know there's a joint also in there because you can hear it. The problem is, though, is that they've covered the entire arm with this synthetic rubber skin. It feels like it's actually more plastic, but I gotta believe that it's a combination of probably several different materials, because plastic would be something that would splinter and split quite quickly. Temperature obviously would be a dictator as to how long these figures will last, but I really do think, and I might be of the minority for saying this, I personally would love to see them going back to traditional visible articulation. And the reason why I say that is because even in the instructions, they outright say, when you are displaying the figure, don't keep them in a permanent bend pose. When you do have them in a pose, put them back and leave them be. And that's fine. But if you're spending so much on figures like this, you would like to think that you could then do whatever you want with these, to within reason, of course. If you are going to bend the arm, I would like to think that the material that they would have decided to go with would be able to stand the test of time, and simply that's just not the case. I don't want to be overly negative about that, but I really want to see these figures last in collections for a very long time. When you encase something in like this rubbery plastic, you are jeopardizing the longevity of these, because of course if the temperatures are the wrong, or any of the outside things that could contribute to damaging this figure are present, you may start finding splits and stuff like that in these rubber encased suits. So again, I like the fact that you do get the seamless look, which is nice, but in all honesty, for having these in a collection for years and years and years to come, I would have rather seen, for what little this arm does, I would rather have seen fully visible, non-seamed, seamless bodies. And instead, I would have loved just to have these as visible articulation points. We've got enough 6-scale figures over the years that have visible articulation. There's really nothing wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with visible articulation points if it means that I can do this and I don't have to worry that this is going to get damaged. Okay, that's one rant aside. So let's talk a little bit about the Infinity Gauntlet, a rather nice representation of the Infinity Gauntlet used in the film. And again, I think it's done quite well. You can see like the little scroll work that's done on the sides, the bands of the gauntlet portion, and then the actual fist itself has some rather nice detailing there with all the stones represented. The one thing about this is it does obviously have a light up function, and the light up function, let me just shift it around to show you where that is. There it is right there. There is a section, sometimes of which there it is right there. Sometimes of which I've actually missed myself trying to find, right where that plate is. It's actually right here. You'll know it by the fact that it's almost got like a fingerprint indentation. You can see right there as to where you can open this up. And if you can't do this right away with your fingers, easily you can go in there with a flat-headed screwdriver. I found that was an easy feat as well. Batteries are already installed. They're LR621 batteries, and you get 3 of them per glove, so you get 6 in total. So you have to install these when you get this guy out of the packaging. And then you have your on and off switch, which lights up the various Infinity Stones. The thing about this, and again, I'm going to be critical only because I want to be able to list all the positives and all the negatives that each of these figures possess. Well, there's tons of positives. The sculpt on this guy, like I said, is spectacular. There are a few little shortcomings, like I said, one of which being the seamless body. don't really care for that as much. The other thing I hoped or wish they could have done was a way to integrate an actual switch on the outside. I don't mean like a rather obnoxious black switch that would be on, off, not likely try, but an on and off switch. Maybe not something like that. But if they had found a way to put a hole right at the bottom of the plate in which a switch stuck out underneath from inside. We've seen other companies do this. Why couldn't they have put a little light switch where you just press it in, turn it on, press it in again, turns it off? I mean, it's not extensive, don't get me wrong, to have to then get into and access. Here I am missing it again. It's not difficult to access this to turn off the lights. But I mean, again, it would just be a whole lot easier if they actually had a protruding switch that stuck through the top here, and then you would just be able to turn it on and off and on and off and on and off. So that is that arm, and we'll just snap this into place. There we go. Just put that into place. It stays securely as well. It's not going to be moving around on you. And here again is Thanos' hand. Now, talking a little bit about the snap, the ever talked about snap, something again that has made many mainstream appearances, people talking about the snap. The thing about the snap, though, is that you can't actually pull it off on this hand, which is a shame. The hand is, by the way, removable. So between this arm and the bent arm, you can then change back and forth the hands, if that makes sense. You can plug this straight hand here, or the one that we will be looking at in a second, the closed fist, can also, again, jump between hands. So if you want a permanently bent one with the Infinity Gauntlet with the closed up fist, you can pull that off. Or if you want to have it on this one, you can do that as well. Now, of course, having this in place defeats the purpose of what I wanted to talk about, which was the snap. But just to show you that you can mix and match these. You can change these out back and forth if you wanted to. Yeah, so talking about the snap, we're going to go ahead and take, you know what, I'm going to keep this one on. I'm obviously going to turn off the light because I don't want this to dim out on me because I've drained all the battery power. So I'm going to just snap that into place. Line that back up, put that back into place. We're going to keep this arm on this hand on this arm because we're not going to use that for a second. If we want to use, say, this arm, now this still has a rubber layer over top of his body, but this one you can't move, you can't bend this, which again leads me then to make the following statement. Even if you couldn't bend the arm, if this is completely staction, I don't personally think it needed to have additional skin over top of this. You could easily pull this same feet off, though the surface may feel different, but you could have cast this completely in plastic. I think it's unnecessary, in all honesty, to add a layer of something that could give you problems down the road. Again, you can see the plastic layer that's over top of this, but it's not really what we're talking about. Not talking about that. So I've already gone ahead. I'm taking the liberty of adding the batteries to this arm as well, because you have to add to 3 here and 3 to the other one as well. This has the same light up switch, has the same plates. There we go. And we're going to replace it with, instead of the closed fist, we're going to change it out to, once again, the open hand. And I just want to show you the way that the hand is designed. There is essentially a ball joint in there. I got to believe there's a ball joint in there. And then there's a hinge in 2 places. One there and one there. The thing is, though, that's as far as the finger bends. Finger up here is fine. But the finger having it bend here at its, I guess its first knuckle, that's as far down as it goes. Obviously, they couldn't have put a longer ball joint because it would be very much visible, I think, from the outside here. But unfortunately, what ends up resulting in this is if you do want to pull off the snap, so let's bring these fingers in as if Thanos is doing the snap. That's right there. Right there. That's as far as you can go. The reason why I also think that this is maybe not even a ball joint inside is the fact you can't rotate the fingers. Even if you could only bend that far on the hand, why I think this is just a hinge is because you can't rotate that finger over. If these only had ball joints, Hinge joints are fine up here, but if you only had ball joints here, and I don't feel like there are ball joints, you would be able to at least rotate the fingers. I have immediate resistance if I try to turn that finger any more than what I'm doing. Even if you had those ball joints and limited by what you could do up here, you could at least twist the fingers inward, twist this finger inward, and at least meet closer to the thumb than what you're currently doing at right now. As a result of it, it sort of looks like the snap, but it's not quite there. The other thing I think that Hot Toys could have done to rectify this is maybe not incorporating the ball joints like I had suggested, but instead rather they could have just given us a secondary or third, I guess by this point, third hand, where the third hand part was actually a full out snap. Maybe not something that would have to be changed, kind of like the fist, nothing that you would be able to independently move any of the fingers to, but at least if you gave us a permanent snap part, you could swap that in. It would still have the light up capabilities where all the stones would still be visibly lit, and you could still pull off the snap. Because right now, the only options you have available are the flat palms, the closed fist, and you have almost the ability to pull off the snap. But like I said, it's not quite there. I felt bad that I took Thanos' arm and ripped it out of the socket, leaving nothing there, so I decided to put it back in. Only then to rip his hand off. I ripped his hand off to show you his 3 different hand options available from the folks over at Hot Toys. When you pick this one up for yourself, he's going to come with 3 different hands. And all the hands, as you could probably guess, are going to go to this side. This one is solely kept for the Infinity Gauntlet. First and foremost, we have a closed fist, which you can see some nice vein work done in the hand itself. Nice job overall on the fist. Maybe if this is how you're going to be displaying the figure, I don't know. I mean, I'm not you, but I probably would be displaying him with a little bit more of a dynamic display, at least going into the other 2 hands as possible options. Again, for what it is, it's not a bad looking hand. You can see kind of like the speckling of 2 tones of purple there, and even like the fingernail, if you look at it right there, right even down there, they've painted in the lanula. Yes, the lanula is actually the half-shape, crescent-shape bit of white that's at the end of your fingernails. You're learning stuff every day. Even like the little edge where the fingernail has started to grow in, they've painted that in also in white. Fine job. Fine job. The other things available for hands are 2 variations of hands, one being sort of more of a relaxed palm, and one being more exaggerated, like I'm going to grab somebody like Spider-Man and whip him to the ground. I probably will end up resulting in displaying him with more so this hand portrait or this hand portrait, and probably moving further away from the idea of displaying him with a fist. I'm thinking to myself while I'm looking at this figure how I'm really ultimately going to display the figure, and I think I'm probably going to settle on the idea of the bent arm and possibly trying my best to mimic the snap. When it comes to then the other arm, I'm probably going to maybe go with the relaxed palm, and you can see again the nice detailing, the nice little almost speckling. We keep talking about speckling as kind of the way to describe this. Again, just really nice job just on something simply like a hand. Don't spend nearly enough talking about things like head portrait are obviously the go-to. Clothing is always the next available thing that we go and talk about. But sometimes things such as just a hand get so overlooked. I want to spend some time and focus some time discussing Thanos' hands. There you go. So he comes with 3 hands. Again, and not a lot of accessories to come included with the figure. I guess he comes with the necessary accessories. I mean, again, I could go absolutely crazy talking about some of the other things that he could go and include with. A lot of them really are centered around the gauntlets. The gauntlet could have been a standalone piece, something which he could have actually held, before he puts it on. They could have also given us the damaged or electricity running gauntlet after, like, the post-snap. Something, again, there's a couple of different variations of gauntlets. Maybe, you never know. Maybe Hot Toys, seeing, of course, the success of Thanos, may branch off, kind of like what they've done with the new Mark 50 accessory set. Maybe give us a Thanos accessory set with the various different versions and different looks for the Infinity Gauntlet, including one that actually has a snapped hand. So, having a look at Thanos' articulation, his head rotates all the way around. And as we had already discussed, he does have a double ball joint or dumbbell ball joint located in his neck and located in the socket of his head. This then allows his head to tilt further forward and tilt further back than just a standard ball joint would afford him. And like I said, his head rotates all the way around. You can hinge it, rock it back and forth. The one thing about it, though, is that his head is prone to hitting the little top part of his collar. You just want to be careful of that. Consistent rubbing back and forth will most definitely leave marks at the corner of his chin, and most definitely could probably cause a little bit of damage to his collar. So you just want to be careful of that. We've already sort of looked at his arm articulation. He has a nice ratcheted joint. I always appreciate when they give us ratcheted joints, and his arms technically could rotate all the way around. And we've already discussed this, and unfortunately, like I said, you're limited to what you can then really do with his arm. Contributing to, of course, the cause of the problem being the skin layer that they put over top of it. I still would favor myself visible articulation, but that's what the route they ended up going with. I just worry again about this splitting, especially creating a line right here. So unfortunately, you're sort of relegated to keeping this guy in museum poses, other than for the fact if you are using the bent arm. At least the arm is already bent. You don't have to worry about jeopardizing any sort of damage to the skin by doing anything further to it. The hand rotates all the way around and hinges back and forth. Thanos does, in some regard, have a torso crunch, but because he's so encased in dense plastic up here, it's next to impossible to be able to access it. I do feel like right here, you can kind of push your finger in, and it feels like it does recess a little bit right here, making me think that there's kind of a crunch articulation point right there, but it'd be next to impossible to access that with the type of suit that they've given him. Lastly, for Thanos' articulation, his legs hinge out, a nice ratcheted joint there, and they go forward, they go back, stopping at around there. He has a swivel on the top cut of the thigh. He has what looks to be a double hinge on the knee. It's just, you really, unfortunately, not able to really see what's happening underneath all that. So you kind of have to guess where natural knees would bend and kind of gauge it from there. But it seems like he has a double hinge happening in his knee. And then he has articulation, just a standard ball joint in his foot. His feet do rock back and forth, giving you that ankle pivot. They hinge up and down, and they could rotate all the way around, except for the fact he's got the back cuffs of his boots, preventing a full foot articulation, full feet from rotating all the way around. For some collectors, there was a bit of a time wait before Thanos was finally shipped out, between the time he was first announced online to the time that many online stores were finally able to acquire stock of him. There was a bit of a wait. I think the wait was worth it, though, when we eventually got this guy in hand. I can tell you firsthand, in hand, Thanos is a spectacular sight, an over-towering titan, much bigger than the rest of your 6-scale figures, so you may want to make some allowances when it comes time to put this guy on display. You may have to move some stuff around. He probably won't fit in a detolf as is, unless you have him crunched over or you remove the shelf above him. It's still all worth it for what we ended up getting with Thanos here. He does have some problems, and minuscule problems, and they're not necessarily linked and attached directly to Thanos, or at least one of them is. The main and primary problem that I have with this figure, and it's more or less across the board, I can paint one brushstroke across many of Hot Toys' recent releases, it's the idea of using seamless bodies. While it does seem good on paper, and it does result in a figure that looks much more realistic to his film counterpart, it does cause problems and issues down the road if you ever pose this guy in anything other than what you're looking at right now. At least to the credit of Thanos, Hot Toys opted to give us a bent arm, so at least if you want to put him in something other than just a museum straight arm pose, you can pull it off with the pre-bent arm. Again, the thing is, though, why make that seamless? That could have easily just been one solid bit of plastic. The other thing specifically more pointing to Thanos, and pointing and being the operative word, is in his hand. Kind of wish that he would have been able to pull off a successful snap. This is as good as I can accomplish with what I have available. Whether they could have either incorporated better ball joints or being able to rotate the fingers at the base or at the knuckle of the hand probably would have been one way to fix the problem, or just outright give us an alternate hand. Being that we've already got a hand that has articulated fingers, and being that we also have a hand that already has a closed fist, they should have also included an additional hand where it already had a pre-molded, pre-sculpted snap. Then you could work around the idea that if you wanted to display the figure with his iconic snap, you could pull it off without trying to navigate around the limited articulation that he has in his fingers. Still though, for those small shortcomings, I think this is a spectacular release Thanos. And like I said, it was worth the wait. Now physically seeing this guy in hand, it was worth the wait. If you guys are interested in picking this one up for yourself, you can currently swing on over to the folks over at AlterEgoComics.com, which should currently still have this guy available. They're so frequently selling out of their stock because people are just jumping on them as the pre-orders are being fulfilled. But you should still be able to pick up Thanos. He is available over at Alter Ego Comics. One of the reasons why I go to Alter Ego Comics as my go-to online site is one of the reasons, and one of the best reasons, as small as it may seem, is the fact that they also ship these guys in double boxes. Most of their 6-scale figure releases get a double box treatment. In other words, when you get the mailer boxes, normally those brown mailer boxes for Hot Toys, they usually come on their own, and sometimes along with that can be problematic for bad weather conditions. Often at times I've gotten some mailer boxes that have had some water damage done to them, and luckily the figure inside was still fine, but there's always that running problem that weather can always play havoc when it comes to having stuff shipped to your door. Alter Ego Comics factors that in and ships these things in double boxes. So basically you would have the Hot Toys box inside of a larger brown mailer box and carefully packed with packing materials. It's like, again, those little eyes of detail, those little notable points of detail that I appreciate from Alter Ego Comics versus some of the online other sites. Their customer service can't be beat, and again, like, overall, very, very happy with my ongoing purchases that I get over at Alter Ego Comics. And also they offer free shipping on many of their 6-scale figures, so there's all the more reasoning why you would want to pick these ones up over at AlterEgoComics.com. Now, speaking of Alter Ego, the folks over at Alter Ego very generously have offered you guys, the viewers, a coupon code. So if you guys want to use currently the coupon code of SPOT15, that's S-P-O-T 15, you can take $15 off your first purchase of $150. Thanos most definitely is over $150. So if you want to save a little bit on savings, $15 worth of savings, use the coupon code SPOT15, save yourself 15 smackaroos. Today we were having a look at the Hot Toys release of Avengers Infinity War, and this was the Mighty Titan Thanos. What a spectacular looking 6-scale figure. If you guys want to go back and have a look at some of my other 6-scale figure reviews, there's a whole playlist just dedicated to Hot Toys. So find what your fancy is in the playlist and check out those videos if you haven't gotten a chance to do it so already. Also, if you're new to this channel or a longtime viewer and just never got around to doing it, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It's just below this video here. Also, turn on your bell notifications to full so that when new videos are coming onto this channel, new Hot Toy reviews, you'll never miss out. We're going to have a whole bunch of upcoming 6-scale figure reviews coming onto this channel, so if that is your thing, hopefully the videos coming up will also be your thing. Let me know down below, guys, what you think of the Avengers Infinity War Thanos, whether you picked it up for yourself or just solely based on this review. I always like reading your comments down below. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys next time.